The movie kicks off on a big old ship, and there are loads of women on board. Among them, there's this gal named Jayan, who's actually a detective pretending to be a high school student sneaking around on the ship. She and her buddies are keeping a close eye on the ship, with a plan to stop this guy named Hammer from doing some nasty human trafficking stuff. When Hammer finally shows up on the ship, Jayan and her crew get ready to jump him. But Hammer's crew is already there, surrounding the ship. Meanwhile, Hammer is trying to make a deal with a pimp who wants to buy the women on the ship. Since her teammates never show up, Jayan decides to take matters into her own hands and goes after Hammer and his gang. She tries to hold her own against Hammer's guys, but things start looking real bad for her. Luckily, the police swoop in just in the nick of time and take Hammer and his gang by surprise. Turns out that pimp trying to make a deal with Hammer. He's actually an undercover cop named Joe. But even though they catch Hammer and his gang, Joe gives Jayan a piece of his mind. It is because she messed up his plan to nail the bigwig human trafficking boss who was hiding behind Hammer. Now, let's switch to a different scene. We are in a room where some big shot police officers are having a crucial meeting. They're all huddled up to talk about a beef between two famous gangster bosses in Seoul, Young Jae and Ba Do-sang. These two used to be buddies, but then Young Jae decided to go solo. In the end, he's ready to spill the beans to the cops about Do-sang, as long as they promise to keep him and his daughter, Sung-hee, safe. But the police can't do much to stop Do-sang's goons from trying to get Young Jae. So, Young Jae starts doubting whether the cops can really protect him. He decides to disappear. Now the cops have a new plan. They want Jayan to go undercover as a high school student and befriend Sung-hee, Young Jae's daughter. They hope to get the scoop on her dad while keeping her safe from the bad guys who want to use her to trap Young Jae. So, the very next day, they send Jayan on her mission. At first, she's not too thrilled about it because she can't stand school. But her uncle, who's also a detective, keeps telling her how important this mission is for the country, so she reluctantly agrees. Jayan ends up in the same class as Sung-hee and sits next to a girl named So-young. Things take a twist when they start arguing, and So-young kinda turns Jayan against the tough girls in the school gang. These gang girls then challenge Jayan to a showdown in the school's backyard. No big deal for Jayan though, because she's a cop after all. Later, during lunch at the cafeteria, Jayan tries to make friends with Sung-hee, but Sung-hee, who's been feeling lonely since her mom passed away, just ignores her and keeps to herself. After that, Jayan met a guy named No Young, and let me tell you, he was a real head-turner with his good looks. Once school was out, another cop named Kang gave Jayan a lift to her new apartment, which happened to be right across the street from Sung-hee's place. Before leaving, Detective Kang handed Jayan a notebook filled with info about Sung-hee. That night, while Jayan was going through the notebook, she got a surprise visit from No Young, who lives next door to her apartment. The very next day, the news on TV talked about Do-sang, who had just been on trial for murder. But since the police couldn't find any solid proof that Do-sang was involved in the murder, the judge let him go. So Do-sang gets all his goons together and orders them to nab Young Jae as soon as possible, because Young Jae is the only one who knows about his dirty deeds. Especially if the cops manage to get Young Jae to spill the beans, he could end up behind bars. So, the next day at school, Sung-hee gets picked on by the gang leader of the girls, but No Young steps in to help her out. After that, you see the two of them having a friendly chat, and Jayan is watching from the window, keeping an eye on things. Later, when Jayan and So-young are in the locker room, the gang leader gal comes over with a revenge plan against Jayan. But this time, she's got some troublemakers on her side, and they challenge Jayan to a brawl after school. Meanwhile, when Sung-hee is all by herself, her dad pays her a visit. Young Jae suggests that Sung-hee switch schools abroad, but she turns him down. Now here's where it gets interesting. Jayan accidentally spots Young Jae at the school and starts following him. But in the middle of the hustle and bustle, she loses track of him. Then her uncle and Detective Kang come up with a plan. They want Jayan to stage a fake attack on Sung-hee, and later, they'll swoop in to save her. The whole idea is to get Sung-hee to be friends with Jayan, just like the police had planned. And Jayan agrees to go along with it. So after school, Jayan was tailing Sung-hee when suddenly, a bunch of troublemaker students showed up and challenged her to a fight. Now, Jayan was in a big hurry because of her plan, so she tried to get these delinquent students to hold off on the fight. But they didn't give a hoot and started attacking her. She had no choice but to take them down one by one. Once she was done with those tough kids, she rushed to save Sung-hee, who was getting hassled by her uncle's goons. But No Young was already there and had beaten them all up. Even though her plan didn't work out, Jae-in couldn't help but admire No Young for his bravery. He's good-looking, kind, and smart, after all. But Jae-in realized she's a grown-up, and No Young is just a high school student. As much as she had a crush on him, reality hit her. Just when things were getting interesting, someone knocks on her door. Jae-in rushes to open it, and it turns out to be No Young. He confesses his love for her and plants a kiss on her. But hold on, it's all just a dream. So, the next day, a new teacher shows up at their school, and Jae-in figures out that this new teacher is none other than Detective Joe in disguise. Her uncle tells her that she has to team up with Detective Joe to catch Young-jae. But Jae-in isn't too thrilled about working with him, because he kinda blames her for the whole mission to nab Hammer on the ship. Meanwhile, Do-sang is getting real impatient because his guys can't find Young-jae anywhere. He's putting the pressure on them to find him quickly. One day, So-young spots Jae-in with her uncle and jumps to the wrong conclusion, thinking she's a prostitute or something. The news spreads like wildfire in school, and her friends start giving her the cold shoulder. But when everyone else turns their back on her, Sung-hee steps up and invites Jae-in to be friends. She figures Jae-in's got her own share of troubles, just like her. Despite the rumors, Jae-in is over the moon that Sung-hee wants to be friends. And things get even closer between them when Sung-hee finds out that Jae-in lives near her apartment. That night, Sung-hee comes over to Jae-in's place and spills the beans about how worried she is that her dad's about to leave South Korea. Being the awesome friend that she is, Jae-in comforts Sung-hee and assures her that she won't be all alone because Jae-in's got her back. Jae-in then shares this info with her police buddies, and they quickly put together a plan to surprise Young-jae at the airport. The very next day, Young-jae shows up at the airport, but he tries to make a run for it because Do-sang's guys have already figured out where he is and are hot on his tail. On the flip side, Jae-in and the police are right behind Young-jae, and they all meet up in the parking area. Young-jae is stuck between a rock and a hard place, with Do-sang's gang and the police closing in on him. But then, out of the blue, a mysterious biker shows up. This biker's motorcycle starts spewing white smoke, giving Young-jae a chance to make a break for it. So, Jae-in and the police go chasing after this mystery biker. Detective Joe takes a shot at the biker, but the guy shakes it off, gets up, and zooms away. So when Detective Joe was about to take another shot at that mysterious biker, Jae-in stepped in real quick. See, the thing is, he was about to blast a bunch of innocent folks who happened to be around. Jae-in wasn't having any of that. While she was on her way out, Jae-in stumbled upon a watch that looked just like the one No Young wore. So when she got home, she went straight to No Young and asked about his watch. But No Young lied and said his watch was back at his place. The next day, Detective Kang spilled the beans about No Young. Turns out he's a secret agent undercover to protect Sung-hee, all on Young-jae's orders. While at school, Jae-in decided to come clean with Sung-hee and told her she's an undercover cop trying to get info about her dad. Even though Sung-hee was real upset and felt like Jae-in had let her down, she forgave her as long as she promised to always have her back. But that night, Jae-in got some awful news. Someone had stabbed her uncle. She rushed to the hospital, but they wouldn't let her see him because he was in real bad shape and needed intensive care. Jae-in looked crushed, fearing she might lose the only family she's got in this world. Now here's what went down next. Jae-in and Sung-hee are sitting in a car with Detective Kang, and they're supposed to be heading back to Sung-hee's place. But Detective Kang takes a different route and drives them to some unknown spot. When they get there, Do-sang's men has been waiting. Turns out, Detective Kang double-crossed Jae-in and Sung-hee. He got mixed up with Do-sang because he needed cash for his wife's medical treatment. Do-sang's crew gangs up on Jae-in and snatches Sung-hee, using her as bait to catch Young-jae. Not too long after that, Young-jae shows up, having heard that Do-sang's got his daughter hostage. Do-sang challenges Young-jae to a one-on-one showdown. He says if Young-jae wins, he gets his entire fortune back and takes his daughter home. But if Young-jae loses, then Sung-hee becomes Do-sang's. Meanwhile, Jae-in, who got cornered by Do-sang's men, gets saved by none other than the mysterious biker, who turns out to be No Young. The two of them rush to where Sung-hee is being held to rescue the girl. So, the showdown between Do-sang and Young-jae got pretty intense. Young Jae was giving Do-sang a real run for his money, and it looked like he might actually win. But one of Do-sang's guys decided to stick his nose in and shot a stun bullet at Young Jae. That left him all wobbly, and Do-sang turned the tables. When Young Jae was down for the count, Do-sang went ahead and stabbed him in the stomach. Sung-hee was screaming like crazy, and she rushed over to her badly hurt dad. Right at that moment, Jae-in and No-young busted in like a whirlwind. They split up. No-young took on the job of guarding Sung-hee and her dad, while Jae-in went after Do-sang, who was trying to make a break for it. Jae-in caught up to Do-sang and jumped onto his car, causing the driver to lose control and crash into some rocks. She got out of the car in a flash before Do-sang took off again. Just when she had the guy cuffed, someone pointed a gun at her noggin. She turned around, and it was Detective Joe, the guy who'd betrayed her. He says that he was the one who stabbed her uncle because he was fed up with always taking orders from him. When Jae-in heard Detective Joe's confession, she got real mad, and they had a big fight. Meanwhile, No-young was getting worn out dealing with Do-sang's goons. But just in the nick of time, Jae-in and No-young managed to take down their opponents, right as the cops showed up and nabbed Do-sang and his gang. Thankfully, Young Jae seems to be okay, because Do-sang's attack didn't hit any vital spots. Sung-hee stuck by her dad, and they rushed him to the hospital for medical care. As for Detective Joe and Detective Kang, they got arrested for their betrayal. One of the police officers gave Jae-in some good news. Her uncle had been in a critical condition, but was now doing better. Jae-in was super relieved to hear that. With the criminals behind bars and Jae-in doing alright, No-young decided to slip away quietly, not wanting the other cops to find out about his undercover gig. Now the movie wraps up with Jae-in dressed as a nun, chasing down bad guys in narrow, deserted alleys. She finally corners a criminal, but No-young steps in to save the day. After all this time, they finally meet again and share a kiss, a sweet ending to a wild ride. So the moral of the story is sometimes, when life throws stun bullets and betrayals at you, it's better to be a detective in disguise than a high school student in love. And remember, nuns can also make great crime fighters.